Ready?
What's that?
You ready?
Yeah, we're live streaming already and now we're unmuted, so anyone who's watching the live stream can hear us.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting today. I think we all know each other at this point. And I don't see any guests except for.
Hello.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a round of introductions? I just think it's a nice thing to always do, in case there's anybody who's watching the live stream and just the recording processes, we know who's in the room.
Sure, we can do that. Sorry.
Sure, my name is Bruce Quinn, and pass it down. Ellen Conrad.
Claudia Ford.
Emily Flynn, Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston.
Paul Stinkis. Gustavo Salome.
Tanya Gardner.
And John Rosebaum.
And then,
And on the phone, around the.
Hey,
Right.
Brian Slack, Ulster County.
And somebody else out
Yeah.
there.
Helen, can you hear us? Do you want to?
Hi, yes, I can. Hi, it's Helen. I'm Helen Atkinson. I'm here for the Conservation Advisory Council.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth just joined. You want to just give her a second to
Sure.
introduce herself since she's getting here?
Wasn't sure we were gonna have anybody with so many emails I saw.
EJ, do you want to introduce yourself quickly? We just did a round of introductions, if you're there.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm on a call with a client. They called right after the meeting started. Hi, it's Elizabeth Michelle. What else am I supposed to say?
No, that's it.
Okay, sorry, guys. I'll talk to you in a minute.
Okay, thank you. Any public comments?
Okay, a few meetings ago, there was a little bit of a discussion that I was really glad to hear talk about, tactical urbanism and how the city of Kingston might start looking at that. And I don't know if it was Paul Stankus, if it was you, I was trying to remember, I don't think I took any notes, but the discussion was brought up about, I think that John Grossman also talked about it, Lucas Avenue, the synagogue, and the new paving. And if something could be done better than was before with the restriping. And that discussion led to, if I remember correctly, something about bicycle lanes, fitting bicycle lanes in. And the comment was made, well, we have to have a certain width of lane on that street because the emergency vehicles have to get by. And this is a refrain that keeps coming at us, where we have to have a certain size lane for emergency vehicles, and it's bulk. Doesn't make sense at all. Because if you think about it, how often are two emergency vehicles or trucks or anything going to pass side by side? Is it really worth making the lanes so wide to assume that people are not going to pull over the side of the road and you're going to have two wide things pass at the same time? Oh, we better save those 3.5 seconds, that one time that happens every 4 years or something, or less. And to do that, you're putting people in immediate danger. So I hope that that stops being accepted as a comment.
Yeah, I agree. I said that in the document that we shared recently. To me, it's like, it doesn't make sense because the whole purpose of those vehicles is save life, and by allowing them in like that white space, we're putting people's life at risk, and it's like, I also don't buy that. Same, and I think the same applies, I think, we hear that feedback, on the new, Washington Street, Washington Avenue, or Clinton Avenue, that, oh, there are trucks on that, like a lot of trucks use the street, but it's like, is that what we want?
Right.
I made the question, I don't think so, because that's like a family area, right? Like, we should design for what we want and not for what we have.
Yeah, and you think about what's there's the senior residence over on Albany Avenue, then there's the Repco building, the Tudor style building with a coffee shop right across the street. And we're prioritizing the easy movement of trucks when actually the trucks could still get by if you put the stop line a little farther back, they have a larger turning radius and they just have to go slow, just a few blocks.
Well, as a person who has had to deal with the emergency vehicle situation, I gotta disagree with you on cutting down lane widths simply because you think that no two wide vehicles may be going at the same time. You don't want to be on the other end of when they might have to be there. And even though you may think that, with only a couple of seconds, if that couple of seconds is important to your life, you would think differently. It is important to make sure that our streets can safely handle emergency equipment without a lot of trouble. And that safety and emergency equipment is not just fire engines, it's not just the police vehicles, it's also the people that deliver your daily services such as sanitation, street sweeping, and things of that nature. So while I do think that we can take under consideration how we design the streets and what's being done, you do have to take into serious consideration what those vehicles require in order for them to be handled safely.
I don't disagree with you at all, but my point is making is that when this is brought up, it's not logical the way that
It's a blanket statement.
It's not.
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It may sound like it's a blanket statement, and having been on both sides of this, I do agree that sometimes it doesn't feel logical. I just had a situation in which I knew why what was being put in place was happening, but also felt like we're missing a certain part of the logic here. And I do think that perhaps more consideration or explanation can be given to the public as to why certain things may need to stay the way they are.
And I think also looking at plans, like really studying the plans, like for Lucas Avenue, if there was a picture that you all looked at the way that it was laid out, then it would become obvious that in that case, that didn't make sense, that statement, that there was needed to be wide lanes right there.
Perhaps.
And we can't discount the regulations that are put in place at the federal and state level that we have to abide by.
Only when we get grant funded projects.
But I would interject though, that those standards are all changing because of what we're discussing. That it has definitely, not to contradict what you're saying at all, because I do think that we always have to make sure that there is appropriate space for our emergency vehicles. However, what we are definitely finding is that we won't need the emergency vehicles quite as much as if we narrow those lanes and keep it so that people don't get injured as often. And also, another thing to really take into account is while we all have opinions on this, we actually need to be looking at what, what agencies like NOCDO, like what the city is signing on to, and what the safe system approach would call for in these instances. So there is a lens that we should all be using, all of us, to see what is safe. I mean, this isn't like a mystery. So yes, there has to be a lot of discussion about it, but it has to be full and comprehensive. And we have to look at what the experts say about it. We can all have opinions, all of us.
Like, I forgot when we did it, but Ellen and I went out and looked at the projects around Kingston that had been done. And at Wall and Henry, there was a tractor trailer trying to use the truck route. And he basically got himself wedged in there to the point where he couldn't make the turn. And the construction workers had to help him back out of there. And then I think he went down to Linderman Avenue to try to get around the mess, and he had trouble navigating that intersection also. So there's, the problem with the truck routes, and this is a state designated truck route.
Yeah, I mentioned this before, from Islandorf to Downs, a lot of those cross street, they have a weight limit. A few weeks ago, my neighbor that lives in the corner, there was a semi that was using that route, and it's like a 3-ton limit, so it couldn't make the turn. So it drove over the corner of the sidewalk and broke his loose stones. So now he has to replace that. And the city might force him to replace that. To me, if I were
They
him,
actually will, so much better.
no, that he already, they are already asking, and the city compromised by bringing him the bluestone, but he has to pay the labor.
Wow.
To me, if I were that person, I would sue the city because it's not enforcing the law. It's just insane.
Yeah.
Brian's got his hand up.
Brian?
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to add, I believe FHWA guidance so Lucas Ave is an urban arterial. That's the functional classification. FHWA recommends a lane width anywhere between 10 to 12 feet for an urban arterial. I would guess, I don't know the lane widths of Lucas Ave in Kingston, but I would guess they're 12. They could be a little, they vary. So it's hard to put your finger quite on it. So I think there's room to pull those lane widths in a little bit. And what I recall the mayor saying was, I mean, he may have said something about emergency vehicles. I don't recall that statement. I recall him saying that there's a major sewer project forthcoming for Lucas, that the paving job was essentially a temporary fix, which is frustrating. And that they will look at a more holistic design, engineering more holistic design at a later point in time. That's what I recall seeing in print from the mayor. So I think there's room, I think, for further discussion as to what Lucas can become later on. I think the street needs sidewalks too. I think it's extremely important that we get sidewalks on that road. That's it.
There was another pedestrian hit over there just recently also.
That was on Miller's. I actually read the report for that one. Fortunately, it was a low speed collision. It was a mirror strike, and the victim refused medical treatment. So that one turned out okay as far as that goes.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And somebody just joined us.
Hi there. My name is Mike Kuda. I joined the last time we met, and
Okay.
I'd just like to be here,
Visitor,
visit, see what I can.
guest, okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, let's move on. The old business, I don't know if I brought enough copies, and I neglected to send this on to Emily, but I started working on a draft request to the city for budgeting purposes for standardized school zones around the city. And I will send this on to Emily so that she can distribute it to everybody so we can comment on it. Because they're already working on the budget and like to get this into play sooner rather than later so that it's not overlooked. And this is an outcome of our meeting where John, the city engineer, was here. And, we asked him specifically, what can we do to try to get standardized school zones?
Was that in July he was here? You guys,
It was in June. It was June.
I missed July, so.
I think it was July.
Oh, okay, I missed.
Yeah, because last month we should have had the sidewalk.
Right, we did.
Yeah,
For some reason it didn't.
so, this is what I've drafted thus far, and certainly appreciated feedback on that. And if we can get this together in the next few days, I'll send it off to the mayor and the common council for their consideration.
Can I ask a question? Forgive my ignorance. What are shark teeth?
They're those little series of diamond or triangles that they put on the streets ahead of things like crosswalks. And that's,
I don't think that's their actual.
yeah, I've seen that in official documents.
Do they mean like yield, building a yield?
Yeah, it's basically a stop line for the crosswalk.
Yeah.
Or, there's other places where they use them too. You'll see them around town. If somebody's got another official name for them, I'll be glad to use that, but I know them as shark teeth from looking at.
I believe that is what they're referred to as in the MUTCD, and they proceed yield signs.
Yeah.
They're called Shark Teeth?
I believe so. I'll see if I can look it up just to
Yeah,
confirm it.
any place that we can improve the visibility and the safety for the pedestrians is what the goal is here. School year started and the insanity has already started.
Yeah, if you forget about it over the summer, East of Railroad, we can try to get you around. When you say red shoulder zones, that means when they literally like put the red coloring on the pavement?
Yeah, kind of as proposed at Clinton and
Yeah,
Clinton and Albany, I
that
think.
first Safe Streets project, they did a lot of that.
Yeah.
I was always a little annoyed they didn't do it on Broadway anywhere. I talked about that in the past, because I think the color does help.
Yeah. Because that's, I see it as a huge problem, because people will literally stand in the intersection or right at the intersection so that vehicles can't make the turn. And they're also blocking the visibility of pedestrians and other motorists. And I don't know what the good distance is, but having a 40, 50, 60 foot no stopping, standing, or parking zone at those intersections, the way they did it by the George Washington School, be a huge help from a safety standpoint. So these are the kinds of things that I'm aware of. If you're aware of other things that maybe should be included in
Just sort of, thinking about people stopping where they shouldn't be stopping, it reminds me of Broadway, the corner where people just kind of basically sit, double park, whatever, in the buffer zone. Can you have, I don't know if it's the bicycle cops or whatever, but someone just kind of like maybe loop through at pickup and drop off time, just sort of like, almost like at an airport, be like, move along, like just to kind of get people aware that they're not supposed to be there, like maybe just almost like awareness officers.
Well, I had started a conversation with Ernie Osterhout, the police lieutenant that had been to some of our meetings. And then suddenly I understand he retired. So we've got to find out who our new PD liaison will be. And I'll restart that discussion because things like that. And again, I'll use the Bailey and Edson schools as an example. They have an officer on Hurley Avenue at Quarry directing traffic, but he's allowing vehicles to stack up in the bike lanes, blocking the bike lanes on both sides. So, that shouldn't be happening either. So we need to come up with some kind of I'll just call it an enforcement mechanism for these things.
Well, I read last time was that the red paint was used, instead of just having a concrete curb extension, it was done so that emergency vehicles or snowplows could make those turns. I wonder if on a point by point basis, if that was, if the snowplow or vehicle could make a turn, even if a curb extension was made, that would then enforce, then we would need to get people to enforce, and you can't put your car here, that's where the curb is. Right.
What I've seen happen repeatedly is with the cars pulled right up to that intersection, the UCAT buses can't make the turn. So they're doing what Gestapo just described, they're driving over the corner. And they're not even on the road anymore. It's the only way they can get around there. And the people won't move to give the bus.
You don't want to, driving over the curb, especially with kids around, it's just.
Yeah, this is happening right by the schools. No, it's not a good situation, but I'm gonna find out who our new PD liaison may be. Speaking of liaisons, well, that's on my mind. To my knowledge, we don't have a new liaison from the common council yet, but I understand that another appointment was made, so I think we have a full common council this week, and should hear pretty soon who the new liaison's going to be.
Officially,
He was appointed.
He was appointed and he will stand for election.
Yeah.
So there were three resignations in turn.
Were we given one or we
The
requested?
president of the council assigns
Yeah.
2 different committees. I think she takes into consideration people's interests. But I believe she emailed John and I and said that once those people got appointed to their seats, so Drew Andrews from CCE just got appointed today, I think it was today or yesterday. So I think that's all of them, so I think that then in the bike legislation might come back to this group, that was, she was sort of waiting, I think, on that appointment as well.
Yeah, and there's, I lost track, I think it came up in here. Kevin Smith from, he's the chair of the Ulster County Trails Advisory Council. He has a contact with City Bike. Turns out,
New York City?
New York City. Turns out one of the top guys for City Bike has a weekend house up here. Kevin met him.
Jack Olson.
Lawrence something or other. And anyhow, Kevin's discussion with him, he had offered to, have an informal discussion and trying to set that up. But in the meantime, Lyft has announced that they're considering selling City Bike. And we don't know what the politics of that might be, so I don't know if this meeting's ever gonna happen. But it's something it's out there, it hasn't been forgotten. We'll see if it materializes.
Can I bring us back to this?
Sure.
So what is your proposed process?
I will send you a soft copy that you can distribute to everybody. I'd like everybody to look at it, see if anything doesn't make sense, or if you think we need to add anything. And then with everybody's approval, I'll forward this on to the common council and the mayor. And if we could do that by I don't know, Monday, Tuesday, that seem reasonable, Emily?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. There's no, do you want, so, what am I getting at? So there'd be no voting on it, which is fine. We're not that formal of a council. I just want y'all to be.
Well, that's why
okay with that.
I said, if everybody's approval,
Yeah.
we can do that through the email.
Sure.
And just to, but it's, of those that have seen it, does anybody have any issues with it at this point?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any issues, I think that there could be more though, could we come up with a strategy with the schools to try to incentivize the parents not to pick the kids up
Well, that's
to
another,
begin with?
yeah,
That would be the fewer cars that we actually just had there. And how do we incentivize the kids not to drive to school?
I mean, this is
How do
like
we do that?
a thing like where you have, kids love where you get crap, giveaway, make it a little more expensive than like candy or something. But I don't know, something for every day, every week you walk to school 2 days or something, you get something. I don't know. That's more of the schools, I guess.
I don't,
Well, there could be a safe routes to school add-on, actually, which we already have. We already have a pretty robust safe routes to school, which we could add.
I don't disagree with that notion at all. In fact, I've been pushing that in various ways.
Yeah.
But I think that's a separate issue from this in terms of, setting up the signage, crosswalks, speed limits, all of that stuff. I think they go hand in hand. But I don't think that notion should be tangled up with this notion.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I think ultimately it's just much better always to have fewer cars. So I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I don't have a strong feeling about if it's part of this or not.
Yeah.
But Nina, who joined us one of the months recently, she's leading school wellness committees right now, and they are very interested in safe routes to school. So I don't know that there's a lot of capacity there, but there is a formal group at the school and district level that would be the place where you could propose to do some of the programming. So, and we have a person who right now through our KISS grant who is paid to help coordinate that. So we can invite Nina again to another meeting and talk about how to coordinate some programming.
And
But it might be separate.
I think it's a separate issue from this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is something that I want to keep pursuing.
Keep building on it.
Does this incorporate private schools? Is it just public schools?
At this point, it would be the primary schools. It wouldn't include the high school.
Okay, because I live right here, for instance, the Catholic schools. I'm wondering if that falls under. the sort of idea here.
I think technically they would have to request it.
Okay.
But there's nothing to stop us from asking them to request it.
Yeah, I feel like that should also, like, that part, I don't like of the city. I think like the mayor issued something a while back that saying the schools could request it. I think we should be more proactive because then it's gonna be the same issue that everybody's gonna do whatever sign they want.
Yeah.
I wonder, you were mentioning safe routes, is there special signage that can tell drivers that that is a special, safe route to school? Because,
Yeah, I doubt it because it's not like a DOT program. I mean, but there's nothing to stop a city
yeah,
or a program from coming up with
Because-
their own.
I ride to school, I take my kid to school on a bike, I don't know if I'm following a safe route. And if I am, I would love for other cars to know that. I've been in so many situations already that it's not a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're doing anything like that really in Kingston or in the county. I think it's more about the walking school bus programs, which are great, you know, that's also, but I think that the walking school bus programs, for example, could be made much more robust through Safe Streets. And then the things that we're talking about could be incorporated through that. There's a lot more room for, I would say, creativity.
For instance, there's.
Like where there's a
like,
second walking
there's
school
a
bus in JFK now.
Oh, is there?
Yes,
There's
there's a lot of
trees out
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
that's part of that wellness convenience.
Oh, yeah, I was actually gonna say, because we're talking about funding, funding for a bike bus, could be something that, I mean, we could potentially ask for funding. There's grants.
There is.
There might be, and we might have some funding in our CHIS grant, so that fits really nicely in our CHIS grant, actually. I think that we would need help envisioning what that program looks like, and then we would need either to put out a request for proposals for someone to do the programming. So, yeah, I think that if someone wanted to write up a project description, we could probably see if we can allocate money towards it.
What's the gist?
Oh, sorry, creating healthy schools and communities. I actually, I'm going to the finance committee meeting tonight, but actually I have these for the council if you want to see it. It's a 5-year grant that's in my department that has been, includes in it active transportation. What's that?
You need to do that.
Yeah, so I'd like them back if you don't mind. So it's sort of 4 or 5 buckets. One bucket is physical activity in the community. And that's where we pay for the Green Line wayfinding, the bicycle racks, which we've all seen. We sent out a request from the businesses and nonprofits. We've installed 8 bike racks already thus far with this program. We also bought another pedestrian and bicycle counter with just funds. We've also been doing some other things.
Are those the double sort of cables across the street that cars go over? No. The ones over on Broadway at the Catholic school?
The 2 ones would be a traffic counter.
Yeah.
Which maybe Brian might know more about, but so mine are infrared counters, they're in electric boxes. There's one on Greenhill, for example, and we intentionally, we can look very interesting.
Yeah.
Because they have gotten stolen. Those are mine are not tubes on the road.
Okay. Interesting.
They might be the city's own.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're just not my part of my bike. So bike and pedestrians and bicycles are much harder to count than vehicles,
Sure.
as you all know.
Yeah.
That's why I do,
Those the counters that we rewired.
yes,
Is
yeah,
that-
the ones that you made the post for, yeah,
Okay.
thanks to John actually for all that work that we put the original.
Yeah, that was something we started back at, it was part of the Kingston Lane Trust thing. And Tim Weedman somehow got funded for that, and I don't remember how many we bought, but there's
5,
5.
and 4 are currently installed, and then one is, a couple are broken actually, so I need to go fix them, because they are getting old, and the technology is not great, so if the batteries pop out of the little case, they stop collecting data, there's all sorts of issues. Spiders get in there, they stop.
It seems like the people counting bikes and pens are still gonna be useful for a while.
Well, and I don't know if you all, like, you got the email today, you'll be counting at Greenhill, and you'll be checking that data that we collecting. So, we want to make sure that that data is accurate, because it, for example, it collects groups, so that if a group of people go by, it's counted as one. So if we match that with your data and we see that it's a 1.3 times consistency, then we will have more accurate data that's collected. In addition, with CHIST, we bought a fancier infrared counter, which is much more predictable. It's much more expensive. It's, I don't know what, the 10 times more expensive. So those cheaper counters are great because we've got initial data, but they're failing us now.
I'm wondering, through the county, we might be able to get some good information on those, because they installed them at the Shokan Rail Trail, at the trailheads. So we've got, pretty good counts coming through there.
And in fact, the Empire State Trail, was it the Greenway Conference? I'm forgetting the organization that did it. They just did a report on the use of the Empire State Trail, and they've got counters at various locations along it. So there's already a preliminary report that gets into if you're all interested, and then I think they're going to be doing it regularly.
I noticed those when I was on my trip last year.
Yeah. We went pretty off topic there. I'm sorry, because I had a lot to say.
Yeah.
So,
Not a problem.
want to move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Clinton Avenue, we did get that document to John, city engineer, and he is going to respond to that in writing. So I'm not sure exactly when. He said that he would probably look at it this week, but I don't know if he'll actually get a response completed.
Is
So
the
that's-
project at a point where it can still be changed to the extent that?
That was
I
my
would say minor stuff, but not like a major complete rehash of it.
right. Don't they sometimes do like X% doneness designs? Basically, I don't know what that is, but the language that he used in the email to us very much sounded like he was going to take it into consideration, and if any of the suggestions were affected in the designs, that he would clearly tell you that.
Yeah.
So he made it sound like there was definitely, he was taking it into consideration.
What's interesting about this is that project had been designed, going through a review process, went out to bid. And I think they got one bid and rejected it. And I don't know all the reasons why, except that one was money. It's all of a sudden, the dollars available weren't enough to cover what the bid was. And, or the proposal was, and they pulled it back in to run it through the process again, at least part of the process. So this is a very unusual circumstance. It's the first time in, I guess it's about 12 years I've been involved with this stuff. And I've seen a project go to bid and then come back for this time.
Because of lack of bids? Is
Lack
that
of bids and the dollars that came back.
what do you mean the dollars that came back?
The
Funding for it, like grants or whatever?
the bids that went out, contractor responded with much higher numbers than,
Oh, okay, the counter or whatever.
yeah.
They estimated the project at one level, and the bids came back at higher levels, basically.
Yeah.
Right, so they weren't budgeted for that, so they now have to redesign the project or do whatever and see if they can either work with the contractor or they've got to figure out something else. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's, one of the,
It's not uncommon.
one of the things that I'm pretty sure I had it in emails was, Westbrook. That used to be one travel lane in both directions. And they've got it queued up for 2 travel lanes coming out of the plaza where it meets Clinton. And if they eliminated one of those traffic lights up there, that would probably pay for a lot of the other stuff.
I have John's email from me, I used to, that he said, that he provided written response to each comment, and that he suggested he provides the response along with revised plans if any revisions result from the comments, and give this council time to review those. Then he could meet at a future date if you all feel that there are unresolved issues. So he's offering to revise the plans and then meet with you again.
I also want to think that it came back to us because of the new zoning code and a lot of things that were put on the side were opposed to the new zoning code.
I think a lot of the things that don't meet the guidelines as well as we would like them to had to do with the right-of-way widths and the existing conditions. Those are huge constraints in Uptown Kingston. And after being there for several hundred years, it's kind of hard to move streets and buildings around. So that definitely impacted the design of that. The only thing, well, in my lifetime, the new things up there were Schwenk Drive running down towards Fair Street Extension from Clinton. That didn't exist. And Westbrook Lane wasn't there either. So those two things were added to the existing street layouts uptown. But that was 55 plus years ago.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. I have to admit that I have made no forward progress on the non-motorized vehicle crash data. I have just been swamped with family issues. I have elderly parents. And get into a bunch of details. They have just consumed me the past couple of months, so I didn't make much progress.
What kind of data?
I want to try to get counts from medical encounters. I have contacts in various medical practices, and I worked in a health insurance company doing data analysis, so I get some idea how all that works with encounter data. So I wanted to try to pursue that. And I had reached out to an epidemiologist who worked locally, but I did not hear back. And I understand that she changed jobs. So I've got to find somebody else who might be able to, help me source data. Wanted to try to see what is showing up in the medical data that is not making it into accident reports. I think there's going to be a lot more information there. And if we just get an idea what the incidents are that don't make it into an accident report, that could help us get more support for spending money on infrastructure issues and enforcement issues. At least that's my hope. Whether it pans out,
Yeah,
don't know.
DMV is also trying to target non-specific, like non-traditional, I should say, data sources also. So we're all kind of thinking the same kind of stuff. I think that there's a lot more of this data that's not captured, and we have to figure out how to.
Yeah, I started going through the diagnosis code sets, looking for codes that would help capture this type of data. And it was pretty interesting because they don't talk about things the way we do, like bicycle related injury, pedestrian related industry. You won't necessarily find those terms in those code sets, the diagnostic code sets. So, I'm poking around in there. I did come up with a pretty good list already, but I know that I'm not hitting everything just based on my prior experiences. Alrighty. How are we doing on time? You had to leave?
No,
Or not?
I'm actually, my meeting, I was able to push it up until 6 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Rosen's up next.
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
All right. So you guys want some advocacy updates. So did you get the email I sent you? But if you didn't, it's not a big deal.
When did you send it?
I sent it way too late. I sent it about an hour before.
Oh, it's the last email I didn't read.
Okay. It just might be helpful for everybody else. It's just a couple of slides. It's not very complicated. I just thought it might be good to kind of keep us on track. Because there's a lot, and I haven't even touched on all of it, to be sure. Okay, so I guess maybe Emily asked me to do some advocacy updates. I do a lot of work with Families for Safe Streets. I'm also, kind of been doing a lot of, I did work for a while for the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee. I did a traffic safety grant. And I, as such, ended up kind of really getting involved in a lot of the advocacy pieces. So I just wanted to give this committee some updates on some really important things that are happening that actually really do affect you guys. So probably the most important thing is that Governor Hochul did sign legislation, actually it was close to a year ago now, which expanded the funding. Actually, if we open, you could possibly open upstairs, we could take a look at it. But it expands, basically in a nutshell, expands the funding for complete streets. So most complete streets agencies are getting a little bit more money. It also lowered the threshold just a bit for towns and cities to be able to so that more projects can come under the Safe Streets, view. And so that was all very helpful and positive. Unfortunately, a lot of the other things that we were pushing for did not happen, but this was pretty important. We did manage to also get the maintenance bill signed and passed, unfortunately, and this is kind of what happens in bureaucracy a lot. DPWs and some other groups were really fiercely. So the maintenance bill, part of what was included in the maintenance bill is this ability to reduce our speed limits to 25 miles an hour, which we got. Unfortunately, what we also got was DOT stepping in and saying, yeah, but we still need to do speed studies in upstate New York, even though New York City basically did away with the need for speed studies, and a lot of other smaller cities, Ithaca also basically said that they're going to do away with the speed studies just so that they can implement this. So Kingston could right now, we have somewhat the ability to reduce our speeds to 25 miles an hour, which is the single most important thing for reducing injury on our roads. But because of this kind of hang up that we're still working through, we can't just do it like that. In New York City, basically, DOT said we're going to give up the need for this, and the next day the signs were going up. That's how fast it was. What didn't happen was the reduction of speed to 20 miles an hour in New York City, which I was really was hopeful that would pass so that could then in time translate to us being able to reduce our speeds to 20 miles an hour, which I'm starting to call the speed of light. However, that didn't pass. So we're going to come back next year, and tonight one of the things I'm going to be discussing with Families for Safe Streets is if the new strategy is to try to make this a statewide effort. If maybe a mistake was made by just making it a New York City thing, I think that a lot of people really just didn't quite understand how passionately people in upstate New York feel about this also. Okay, so one of the next things I want to talk about is we've been having a lot of really interesting conversations, Families for Safe Streets, and also Safe Paths also, which is a group that I started representing, with DMV about doing things like increasing the point structure on licenses, which is really, really great. Basically, I kind of look at it as like bureaucratic urban tacticalism, right? So DMV actually did come back and say, we're not going to be able to change these laws, but what we can do is maybe administratively hold drivers more accountable by increasing the points for particularly repetitive, repeat offenders. Those are the people who we just know statistically cause the most problems. So if we can figure out how to make it harder to be a repeat offender, either by taking your license away or making it really expensive, then that might be a good way to go about it. They're also really looking into changing a lot of the language that's used, really forcefully going back into like we need to say crash and not accident. Actually, most of the reports are starting to be changed to reflect that. I'll spare everybody, I'm sure everyone in this room kind of knows why we're so insistent that that be a thing. So that's really positive stuff. So we're really hopeful that even though we didn't get a lot of what we wanted on the legislative side, we are actually really getting a lot of traction from other groups. To get any traction from DMV is actually really amazing. And it really speaks to the way the culture is really, I think, starting to change around this subject. They were some of the hardest to reach, and we've been speaking to Mark Schroeder, who is now the head of DPW and also the head of the Governor's Traffic Safety Committees that have combined. DOT, and DOT, Department of Motor Vehicles. DMV, get it mixed. Sorry, I get my, DMV. So, and he's also the chair of the Governor's Traffic Safety. So that's really interesting. So maybe that is also part of why we're starting to see some movement finally in some of these things. The other thing I'd like to talk about really quickly is the World Day of Remembrance, which is coming up. This will be the 5th year that Ulster County has participated in it. It will be on November 20th. This year, we're really hoping to incorporate a lot of more of the issues that people are really talking about and doing a real grassroots movement, and a lot of petitions and just a lot of noise to the powers to be that they really need to look at these intersections in particular, that people are really at high risk. So stay tuned for that. We'll be talking more about that as it comes along. So some local news. So this is kind of interesting. I'm a little shocked by it myself. The Ulster County Traffic Safety Board, and Brian can attest to this, I'm not a liar, is actually considering endorsing the Idaho stop for cyclists.
Was that passed? So what?
No, it did not pass.
I'm sorry, the what? I'm sorry.
So
No, it didn't pass at the state level. The Ulster County Traffic Safety Board did pass a resolution in support of it.
Oh, we did. Okay, I wasn't there for that. So awesome. So
Is that the island in the?
No.
no.
Okay, explain it.
Yeah. So what that basically says, and it's not law yet, so this is just what the Ulster County Traffic Safety Board just endorsed the idea, is that cyclists, when they come into an intersection and they come to a stop sign or they come to a red light, have to, of course, yield the right of way to anyone who's entering, but they don't necessarily have to stop. And statistically, we know that this saves lives. Every place where this has been implemented, because the highest risk for pedestrians and for cyclists is almost always an intersection, and to be stopped at an intersection is dangerous. So if you don't have to stop, if you can use, your experience and your eyes and your ears to tell you what you need to do in that intersection, you're a lot better off. And in the states where this has been implemented, there's been a lot of really positive result from it. So it is, of course, not a license to run red lights. So let's just get that, it's a yield sign. Basically what it does is it changes the stop sign and the red light to a yield. So if you enter an intersection and you did not yield right away, you're still held accountable and you're still gonna, not be able to sue and do all that kind of stuff, but you will, but it will be taken into account from now on. Like an officer can't stop you, for example.
And what is that called? I'm sorry.
The Idaho stop,
Because it's from Idaho.
because it started in that state. It passed in
Okay, I
that
was
state.
just, okay, all right.
That's why they.
I'm just like, how did I get into this? Okay.
It makes more sense probably in Kingston than anywhere else, because so often if you're biking around, you'll have a four-way stop, and you'll, on a bike, be the only person there. So this is, in those instances, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
How is this gonna be transmitted to the people in the cars?
Well, if,
Because they're assuming somebody's gonna stop.
Yeah.
well, I mean, anytime something like this would be implemented, there would have to be, a new educational push to try and educate. So basically what would happen, hopefully, is that in for new drivers, for example, when you take the test, there would be a question about that. Does the cyclist need to come to a complete
Well,
stop?
the cyclist basically yields now.
Yeah.
So if a car is already at the intersection, you wait for them. Like, that's the right thing for you to do as a cyclist. You know, I mean, that's.
Yeah, it really doesn't change you're right,
Yeah,
it really
there's
doesn't
nothing really
change the
changed.
All
environment.
it changes is that you don't get ticketed and.
All right,
and,
Car being-
Like, if you're at the four-way stop sign on a bike and you see nobody, so you just keep
You're
going.
gonna keep going, I get that.
But previously, a cop, like, you just went through the red light and you know the bell. so
Okay,
maybe-
okay.
Yeah.
And I think it also helps because if you don't have to stop, you go through faster the intersection.
Some guy in cars will just drive into you
Yeah.
while you stopped at the red
And
light.
then there is a issue that a car behind you might not see you while you're stopped, or they assume that you're gonna keep going and then like hit you from the back.
So I thought it at least passed like the
I believe,
Senate.
it
or
may
the-
have passed the Senate, it did
It
not
passed
pass.
one of them, and I just thought it was gonna keep going because.
That's one of the things that's very, very frustrating about a lot of this is that most of the stuff that we were proposing passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. And one or two
Yeah, they-
assembly people.
I remember like emailing Sarah Honda about it, and being like, come on, help us out.
And
Try.
this,
Trust me.
this has been endorsed by Ulster County
Traffic safety.
Traffic Safety Board.
And isn't there the chair of the transportation committee? Isn't there one person who sort of doesn't let the bills come into the committee?
He's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone, but unfortunately, we have a new one. At least in New York City, there is his name is Carl Hastings, and we're not really sure why. But he is just really holding up a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure it's not just him, but he's the one kind of taking the heat. And literally members of Families from Safe Streets went on hunger strike to try and get Sammy's law passed, and this man would not budge. So, yeah, it's pretty tough.
Are you doing anything else? I have something I can add.
Sure.
I had put this in an email to everyone a while ago, but I had emailed, Hinchy, is it Hinchy or Hinchley? Hinchy. His office about, red light cameras. Because we talked about this before about how there has to be like a law passed for it to be done in a jurisdiction, like New York City's done it, I think some other cities out west have done it.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, this guy I was emailing with was like, oh yeah, that sounds good, and the senator's up into it. And so then I think they reached out to the city to see if the city would back such an idea. I don't know if there's been any discussion, if anyone's heard anything about that, but it seems like they were willing to bring up that as a bill.
I think that would be an important
Yeah.
safety feature, I certainly do. I mean, I know there's always resistance to it, but again, the numbers are kind of starting to tell the story.
Red light cameras we use, at least where I was in both cities in California, actually for revenue.
Brian's got his name.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I lived in the city of Rochester for 10 years, and during that period of time, that law was passed to allow red light cameras. And it was somewhat controversial, but they were implemented. It's pretty interesting to see the intersections. I don't think there was any decrease in crashes at those intersections, and they were removed because they were found to have a disproportionate effect on people of limited income, were the ones getting a lot of the tickets. Now, that's just the facts of the case, and because of that, the mayor removed those red light cameras. So I don't know how, if they would ever be implemented in the city under this mayor, if he would be in support of that or not. I think we should do some more research to see if there is a statistical decline in crashes. But I think there was some really interesting conclusions drawn from
Most of
this
the
period.
When I had to install them in Oakland and Berkeley, we had them for, I guess they might still have them. But most of the companies put them in because they said they would be able to increase revenue, not so much that they were safety oriented. Because they would be able to get more people for tickets. There's still a lot of cities who have them, and they hold up in court. I don't think that they necessarily stop crashes or accidents. In some cases, they pay for themselves because there is an expense to putting it in there. And yes, proportionately, depending, a lot of lower income people sometimes have a problem with, because they do get more tickets and they're out there and they're doing more, so. It's something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually a really important thing, because actually part of the reason why they would be there, one of the arguments for putting them in is that it would reduce the risk to people of color, to Black people, Latino people in particular, because when they're pulled over by police, that's a very high risk situation. And, you know, everyone is really starting to also hone in on that also, that actually using the police to pull over certain people in our community puts them at very disproportionate risk. So I would be really curious, I mean, to see what comes out, like, where are they putting these things? I mean, if they're literally putting them not where there's actual crashes, but where there's low-income people who they can just ticket,
Well,
that's an ineffective use.
Yeah,
But I don't
no,
know if that's true.
They weren't put there, mostly they were in our major intersections. And there are still, I'm trying to think of the last division where it's literally like flashlights going off in front of you, because you can see them all clicking.
Right.
Really, it's just like click, 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 all over the place. Yeah, you get something in the mail, it's got your camera, it's got your license plate, and well, okay, you get a ticket. I don't look at it as necessarily it's disproportionately saving people of color from not having any interaction with the police. What I am saying is that most of the time, people of color or other people are probably in their cars more and need to use them more to get from one place to the other. So therefore, yes, if I'm late for work or I don't see the sign, I'm going to make that right turn on red, and maybe the sign is over here, the sign is over there, and I get a ticket for that. I get a ticket I don't even know I got, because I'm not aware that there's a camera there that just took my picture. And I go on, and 2 weeks later, I get something in the mail. They can be helpful. I'm just saying that a lot of the companies that put them in, at least back when I was installing them, really did it that they paid for themselves because of the amount of tickets that were issued, and that you could, instead of using police for traffic enforcement, you could put police in other.
Did the tickets go down over time or anything? Was there any effect on behavior?
No, not really. Not that I saw. Some people would be like, "Hey, slow down. There's a camera up there." You get to know there's a camera.
That's what you would hope eventually.
Yeah, you get to know, but in general, but there is some feedback on complaints, but they have been used for many, many, many years in most other places.
I'm pretty sure that New York City, just recently, they installed speed cameras and they did have a decrease in tickets.
I know where I used to live, there's one very prominent. It's the sort of thing where people would, fly through a red light, the flashes would go off, and I would cheer. I thought it was great. That people were getting a ticket.
Well, all right, and so, but there's just two more things I wanted to touch on really quickly, because I know we've got to get.
Before you move to that, I wanted to bring up a process issue. Something like that, our role is as an advisory committee to the common council and the mayor's office. And if we think something like that's a good idea, we should sell that to the common council and the mayor. And they're the ones that should be reaching out to, our state representatives to gain support. Because if we go direct to, say, Michelle Hinchy, and they get the impression that the city is endorsing this, and the city doesn't know anything about it, it's kind of mucking up the works. We should really, remember that we're an advisory council to the city. We can't make decisions really, but we can present requests with sound arguments, to gain support, and then our elected officials in the city can pursue that as they see fit. It's just something to keep in mind. Because I dare say we can create problems, but
I was
lead.
feeling like just because, I'd done some reading about it and I saw that you had to have a bill, it wasn't sort of something you just do. Yeah.
Because I know there's been things that happen, in the county that kind of blindsided elected officials in the county, because they didn't even know what was going on, but somebody else had presented in a way that I thought it was, something the county wanted. And we just have to be careful about things like that. All right.
Yeah.
A couple more points.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, one of the other things that is kind of important that's happening that pertains to Complete Streets is that the county is taking a look at the Complete Streets, countywide Complete Streets plan that I think is 15 years old now. That's pretty old.
Yeah, forbid
Yeah, so, the traffic safety board requested that we take a look at it again. And,
Brian unmuted on the one.
huh?
Brian unmuted and.
Okay, yeah, so, and the county executive did give us back a really positive response with, at least as far as I know, no timeline, but a positive response to that. And what, some of us, Phil Erner and Laura Petit and Tanya and, a few others of us have been working on a vulnerable, road users bill of rights that actually Phil Erner did bring to the legislation. Obviously, about 70% of it got tossed out, but a small amount of it, they came back and said we might be able to do something with this. So we're going to try and get that incorporated into this new Complete Streets policy. We thought that made the most sense rather than trying to have this separate vulnerable road users bill of rights, which a lot of people don't even understand. And then the last thing I wanted to just mention was that I'm sure you guys are aware that the mayor actually, at least in a meeting with me, said that he is, and also sent out a memo saying that he is going to, as much as is in his power, sign on to the safe system approach. That's very exciting news. It really opens up a lot of funding potential, and it opens up a lot of potential for taking new looks at some of these projects. If anyone wants to take a look at what Safe System is, there's lots of really good information online and suggest looking at either NOCDO or at Vision Zero. They have really good guidelines about what that is. So that was really good. And then the mayor also said, and you guys probably also know, forgive me for saying guys a lot, talk about that. But as everyone here probably knows, we are signing on to NOCDO also, which is really great news, Emily. Yeah, and that's about all I know.
I've since learned that NACTO is actually quite exclusive to become a member of, and actually it's a privileged group of municipalities that are welcome to be a member. So we all have access to their documents without being a member, which is fabulous. But the city has applied to become a member, and if we get it, we will be not the smallest municipality, but maybe the second smallest municipality. And if we get that kind of recognition, I think that we will send out a big press release. I think that it'll be really impressive that a city of our size will be into it. And Brian, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. Nice work, Rose, and that's a fantastic summary. I just want to add one minor clarification that the county is considering updating its bicycle and pedestrian policy, which is generally referred to as the Complete Streets policy, similar to City of Kingston's Complete Street policy, because we do have a non-motorized plan that was passed right around the same time. We're not considering updating the non-motorized plan at this time. I just want to offer that clarification.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think another piece of the county efforts is that there's policies in place that haven't necessarily been followed. And this is something that Nick Mercurio in particular has brought up numerous times. And getting the county to actually fund what should be done is like the next step, or maybe the concurrent step to making the changes. I have to think about that too.
Yeah, that's kind of how it, we were talking on board meetings, like we already have this policy. So when was the last time we actually took a look at it and see if it really is being implemented properly? Have we actually had an evaluation of it to see what we've done? A lot of it we have, particularly when it comes to trails. One thing that we haven't even come close to is the car reduction by 20%, which is kind of like promised all over the place. So I would like to see us move more towards that, that's for sure. So
If anyone wants to.
better bus, absolutely. We're working on that one too.
I just looked at the NACTO thing and it looks like transit agencies can actually join now. It looks like it's a new addition that I hadn't noticed before. So there might be a good, I mean, our public transit system is just awful. Has so much to grow, but the Ulster County Legislature has really started to show interest in trying to legislate it into a better state. But turns out the transit agency can also become a member of NACTO. I just saw.
Okay.
Sorry, Janet, that was too excited.
Totally.
Before I forget, and while we're kind of talking about these things, somebody in an email that I breezed through asked about the Woodstock Complete Streets Advisory
Oh,
Council. You've got
Yeah.
one of their reps on your healthy.
I forget who passed.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, just FYI, Kristen Kessler, who is a
That's right.
staff person in my department, is actually on the Complete Streets
Oh,
Advisory Council
nice.
for Woodstock. She, I think, has attended this meeting at least once, so, we have that connection, it's informal, but,
And I know several of the other people on that committee. In fact, I could be mistaken, but I think Christian she was like a Johnny Appleseed at one point and went to Saugerties and I think Mark Waltz and, several other.
Momentum to keep it going, unfortunately, they fall through.
And here we are, what are we about? 12 years old, I think, our committee. It was a hard sell back then, but today, we've got people lining up to participate. And it's a huge, huge change over the years. So some of these communities maybe would be receptive now.
And it was just
But you need the people to run with the ball.
yeah.
All right, I just wanted to put that out there, that we do have connections to Woodstock.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's like a way to collaborate. It's like maybe there's like a benefit of like getting together and like help each other. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, they kind of look at us as the,
Yeah, they're also so much bigger.
we're the experienced
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it couldn't hurt. I mean,
trailblazers here.
I would offer, I now run a rental shop out in Shokin, New York, which is, only 20 minutes from here. And I would be happy to do a bike ride / meeting, social gathering so that we could network with any of the Complete Streets groups, particularly like Woodstock. I think that would be a really great idea.
I can add, I know that they're doing a walk audit right now, I believe they got funding from the AARP to do it, so we could ask Kristen or someone else to come and do a presentation of what they're working on, vice versa.
As in like sort of walkability, like they just walk every street in town kind
I
of?
believe they're focused on the sidewalks right in town that we drag through town, but I can't speak, accurately to their projects, but for example, we could ask them to come and talk to us.
So you can tell them that the streets of Kingston aren't walkable.
That's up in Woodstock now.
I know, I'm just saying, but as somebody who walks the street, most of them in Kingston are not walkable, so we don't need to walk every street.
So we have about a little less than 20 minutes, we've got
Yeah.
2 more things, not
And I neglected to print out that document that you sent
I
around.
got it, don't worry.
Okay,
Shall we move on to that?
sure.
So y'all, we talked about bylaws for this committee, which we don't have any. So, with your permission, I drafted up a version 1 of some potential bylaws. The things that I want to point out to you at this time is that I basically picked up language from the resolutions from that got this committee going, and then I picked up our Live Walk Kingston bylaws and sort of merged the two. Just a point of process, this is the very first time we're talking about it, we will not be voting, I do not suggest we vote on it for a couple of meetings. So what I recommend is that I will just explain a little bit more about this and then send you the link after this meeting. And sort of like we did with the other Google documents, you can make comments on it yourself. And then we should absolutely have further discussions about it. I'd like to point out that under each sort of paragraph, I listed where I picked up that information from. So I think that sort of to show you a little bit of my thinking of why that was selected, and you can always go back to that original document if you'd like to clarify it. So Resolution 196 of 2010, Section 5 is where I picked up this paragraph above that little gray language. Can you all see that? So, for example, the language from the resolutions, we could clarify in additional text, but we can't change the resolution. But we
Right, because that exists somewhere.
that exists somewhere else. But we could say, we think that this means X, or we're gonna follow it in this way. So I just want to clarify that. So then if you go to rules of procedure, membership class, this is picked up, this is just the way that we did it in the book. Kingston, there's many other ways to do this. I personally think it's just a nice, clean way to do it. But even some of this language from the Bill Kingston, now I might redo and it's a little bit formal. So, I think that there's things that can be deleted here. But I tried to pick up the language from the resolution, like, we can't change that the voting council members will serve for a 2-year terms. That's in the resolution. We'd have to get the common council to change that. But we can change some of the processes for things if we like. So for example, I made a note at the top. What I didn't include, or I forgot, was a process for a letter of support. So we should probably draft a paragraph about if someone asks for a letter of support, does John sort of have your consent to, with me, decide, yes, we want to submit a letter of support and draft that and submit it within a week, because usually there's a very quick timeline. So I think it's something that we should talk about and put into this process. I don't think we need to go through it point by point this time, unless you want to have these specific questions. What I would do is send this, like I said, as a link, and you can review it at your, when you have time. Any questions about that?
Can I, sure. Why are letters of some support given with such little notice? It doesn't seem to happen with other boards and commissions. Is it possibly because the administration has grown used to so much of the Complete Streets Advisory Council's work being done over email?
No, I strongly disagree. We get requests for letters of support from many other organizations. They are often with less time than when the city asks for it. I find that the grant process is very complicated, and the letters of support sometimes is a bit of an afterthought, and I think that there's often a very quick turnaround that's needed.
Yeah, I've written letters of support for Sue Ulster and things, and man, a lot of times they're like, can you get that to me like in the next hour?
Yeah.
And it's like,
You don't realize.
yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I know I'm biased, but, we have meetings about the RFAs, the large New York State grant applications that happen, like, name in this moment. And I feel like the city's actually quite good at planning ahead, and will often ask their partners, weeks ahead of time to send us letters, but it's a rush. It's, especially since we only meet once a month. And if we have a sidewalk meeting every other month, that also changes it. So I think there has to be a process for a shorter deadline. That's what I propose.
Right, so I guess we can review this individually and bring it back to the table at the next full agenda meeting, which will be what? September, November.
It's October,
November,
right, task force is October 11th, and they break up it's the third, it's the second Wednesday.
No, it's good to get this started. Somehow we've managed to survive for about 12 years without it. But, again, the organization's changed. I mean, early on, you're hardly talking about things that we're talking about now. Much simpler. We didn't have as many things that we went to the common council or mayor about. Now it seems to be a regular thing. And letters of support, that's really ramped up the past few years. I don't remember doing any of the first few years I was on the council. Just weren't asked.
I mean, again, I'm biased, but the city has applied for a lot of grants in the last 10 years. And become very successful at achieving them, so I think that that's just continuing. You know, our raise grant recently was a really huge accomplishment.
It's much different now than where we were a decade ago.
For downtown.
By the way, it's just so that the raise grant, that's that large grant that was publicized, is just getting going. It hasn't started yet, but
For bids or what part of it?
even in contract with the funders, the federal money, we're not even in contract yet. So these projects take a very long time and we're just getting going. I bring it up because the Engage Kingston page, used to be called Weaving the Waterfront. Ruthann has now added raise to it, so it's a little bit easier for you to find that and stay updated with it. And that's the page to go to find updates on that project. I'm sure you'll all want to follow along. And there will be a robust public outreach process, especially because it's federal funding and there's a lot more encouragement to do public outreach. So there'll be many opportunities to provide.
Yeah, and can we, as a council, sort of be kept in the loop and I guess, even be involved in feedback sort of officially?
I can tentatively say yes. You know, I don't know what capacity I'll be involved. I'm not a transportation engineer, but that's a great thing that we could ask. We could say, what is the Complete Streets Advisory Council's role in this? And try to pass that forward. The next thing on the agenda would be administration.
Administration.
If we want to talk about applications today, you're the chair, so it's up to you. I would have a suggestion for how we would go.
Sure.
And that just is that if we want to talk about applications to the council, that we go into executive session. So we would thank our visitors that are here, and then we would we would stop live streaming because we'd have to be able to keep talking with Brian and Elizabeth. But I suggest going into executive session because I just think that we can have that discussion more freely.
That sounds reasonable.
I gotta go anyway, guys.
Okay.
Bye, Brian. Okay, Brian.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Have a good evening.
That's good. And, he stayed 20 minutes longer than I thought he was going to.
I tried.
That was the last thing on the agenda otherwise?
Yes.
Announcements, communications.
Well, so unofficially, I mean, I guess we had talked previously about doing a review of the Broadway project now that it's been in effect for a while. And I was thinking it would be good to do that while it was still somewhat warm out. I don't know if we wanted to sort of formally do it. I was thinking of just sort of having, similar to what we did for the feedback on different towns and cities sidewalk renewals, doing a sort of categorized review of the different parts of it, like whether it's crossings and signage or I don't know, like, but is there still interest in that?
Can you clarify what you mean?
Well, I guess just feedback on the different aspects of it. I think we think they're working, things we think aren't working.
If I recall, at one point we had talked about collecting feedback about Broadway and sending it to John.
Yeah, because I think it's sort of a normal part of the process that after a project's been implemented for a certain amount of time, it's now sort of functioning as it's thought to function, presumably how people want it to function, but maybe not perfectly. So it's a time to sort of incorporate feedback into it.
Is it actually complete? It's been signed up, they don't work.
I thought they just needed the one last street light, right? And then,
I thought it was complete.
yeah,
But I thought it was.
Yeah, we had the grand opening thing last.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, but there were things on it that were not completely done due to logistics and supply issues. And I was just wondering, if everything is in place, I hear what you're saying, and that sounds like a good idea. But if it's not done, then what would you be evaluating?
I'm fairly certain it's done.
Yeah, I
think
thought
there's
that's
other
why
parts
we
that
had
are
the
not.
grand opening,
Yeah.
because they finally got the
Yeah.
The last of the
That
lights
was a
and
little
stuff.
finicky that needed to.
There's a few of those.
It was more, it was a few little doohies.
Yeah, there was some landscaping or something that was
I guess
still in process, but otherwise it was complete.
my question would be back to the council on how is it that you'd like to provide feedback? So I think you all should decide how much work you want to put towards that and how you want to present it. So if it's a letter, how are you gonna craft it? If it's an informal walking tour, we can do that, but I don't know that you'd have a great deliverable to give John.
Right. I think a letter would be the way to go, but with sort of bullet points or whatever it is you want to raise.
Sitting out there doing the pet cyclist counts.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking of this sort of in line
You
with
see
that.
things that clearly are not working.
Yeah, like everyone turning
Things
right
that-
on, I'm assuming it's like last year, everyone turning right on red at Prince.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not-
So it'd be appropriate to get qualitative data and just, if there was a walk down the street, just to ask people around about, say, you use this often, what's your experience been, do you see, here's what we're intending to do with this bike lane at this intersection, are you seeing issues with that, or, something like that.
That's the best way to really, I think, do it and to do it strategically, right? So go over to People's Place, go over to the YMCA, go over to places where A, there have been issues and B, where people have, at People's Place, I know that they would host a town hall. They've already said that they would be happy to do something like that because a lot of people want to talk about,
For feedback on Broadway.
or feedback on that, particularly their little section over there.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is, you need to hit where the people, like, where their issues are. That's where you're actually gonna get people who are gonna stop and talk.
I mean, I was,
And once you get the feedback, then what do you expect to happen?
well, I would think that they would review it, maybe John or whoever. And then hopefully incorporate the stuff that they thought was valuable into updates. I assume maybe there's an update to these things at some point ever, no?
They just have to ask the funder, right? They just have to ask permission from the funder to do it.
Okay, so again, so I'm not the traffic engineer. So Broadway this is how I'll say it, the Broadway was a really large project. And it took 10 years to do it. There's no plans to redo that streetscape that I know of.
Right.
It's a
So
50-year.
I don't know that, I think personally, I think there's value in doing an assessment. But I don't know that it would be incorporated anytime soon.
Couldn't it be added to next projects?
Yeah.
For instance, the waterfront project?
That's
If
why I
there's
think.
some similar design elements. We learned something from Broadway, we can
Yes.
apply.
I mean, the things that I'm thinking off the top of my head are the fact that the walking and bike green light signals aren't synced up. Like how long it takes after you hit a button for the walk signal to change. I mean, that is just some guy going in there and just doodling with something.
So, but I can't speak as
Yeah,
educated about it
yeah,
as
I
I
don't
would
know
like,
either.
but I have heard examples such as, actually, it's really complicated, and like the city doesn't have the software to do it, we have to like hire a consultant to do it. I don't know that that is the case, but I've heard of such examples. But again, I think that's great feedback, and again, I think that's great feedback to start recording, and I don't know if you all remember, as part of the bike plan, when I hear feedback from people, I'm filing it away, so that if we ever did an update to the bike ped or other things, they'll have a folder of feedback from people. So I do think that feedback is great, and we keep collecting it. And I encourage this council to do that. To me, it comes down to capacity. That's why I'm trying to put it back in your court of, what is it that you want to create? And you really think about how you want to do it.
I think flashbacks to doing ethnography where you're out there collecting random free-form stuff, and then you have to turn that into a product you can do something with. And I tend to agree that the best we can do with this is to use the information to inform other projects.
But that's really important. It's
Yeah.
extremely important. It's
Yeah.
extremely important to collect this data. For example, because we've highlighted where John was killed in the bike ped plan, now this is an area where we can go to DOT and say, like, this has already been highlighted, we should do something. So I do think we should do that, so. yeah.
And going back to your light thing, the council, I feel like, could recommend to the city, we recommend that the lights should be done in this way going forward. Feels really strong to me, and a pretty clear directive to be considered. So, even, right, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer about Broadway specifically.
No,
But there's Vauxhall and Flatbush
future projects,
is still a future project. The RAISE grant, as we mentioned earlier, will be another big, large transportation project. So there is things in the pipeline that, policy that you create now would be effective.
And there's projects that are pretty well along and we still might not be able to impact. Because there's things that are getting to a point where they're ready to go to bid or going to bid. So those projects are really tough to influence at this point.
But you're not saying definitively, right? Because some of the things must be changed on Broadway. And you gotta at least give it a try. Because there are some truly dangerous aspects to that project that must be changed. And the Common Council does have a Public Safety General Government Committee. They can do a resolution, they can require to change it, or decide to change it, they can work with the engineer. And there have been in grants across the United States where there was something that was tested out. The process is you ask the funder for permission to change it because there's a lifetime for the grant. So that money now we're in a pickle, certainly, by having solidified some problematic things. But, the biggest, the light signalization is going to be a hard one because we got specifically NYSERDA money, which is, I think, just a terrible grant where it's about prioritizing the vehicles not stopping at the expense. That's why we have those red buttons where you have to wait at the corner because of that terrible NYSERDA use of the NYSERDA funding for lowering emissions when we're about to have electric vehicles. So there's some problems that maybe are going to be a larger ask, like getting rid of the red buttons on Broadway. But I interviewed one of the engineers before the project was finished, and they said that those are changeable. So for instance, just in terms of a nuisance, we gotta change that sound system on the buttons. That can't keep going on. We can't have every single pedestrian signal continue to beep nonstop 24 hours a day. That's got to stop. So there's nuisance stuff, but also no red on red. Why on earth did we put the no red on red down at the side? It needs to be up by the signal. That just move the effing sign. That they're gonna allow you to do.
should cost a lot.
Alrighty, well, we can pick that up at a future meeting. I don't know if there's really much we can do today or at a time.
Yeah, we can add for the next one, like just the sort of idea of collecting some data or something, so we have it to then.
We informally have been collecting data all along.
Yeah, sure.
Through personal observation discussions.
Right.
And seeing what shows up in the paper, unfortunately. Alrighty, well, let's move into executive session for a bit and
Thank you.
Thank you.